This is Smith Sharp, and you're listening to Navigating Clarity.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to week 2 of Navigating Clarity. We're so glad you've joined us. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about principles and how do we decipher what principles we're going to live by, and with culture and just society around us, what biblical principles should be important to our lives, and kind of how do we guide that.
Wow. You think that's going to be exciting?
I think so.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, we will see. Listen, why don't you, you listen to the message and you come up with, how do you do this?
Yeah, so based on Sunday's message, I just kind of picked just a main topic that I think we should just break down further and dive into deeper, just based on what's going on in culture, what's going on in current events, and just kind of where we are as a secular society and how we should think of that just more in terms of Jesus. And
do you like people that watch it, can they like send in recommendations or anything like that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right.
They can send them to me. They can send them to you.
Okay, well,
we love recommendations.
You can just send them to you. They can send them to you.
Okay.
I've got enough recommendations already.
We might not take them all, but we'll take the good ones. So if you make them good,
I'm sure they're all going to be good.
Kidding.
How's your marriage going?
It's great.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Not everybody knows you're relatively new.
Mm-hmm. A year and a half.
18 months.
18 months.
Man, okay. That's good. Yay. I was there.
18.
Yeah.
You were there?
Yeah, I was.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
You did the wedding.
I did it. Yeah. Okay. Great. It's so good. All right. So what do we want to do? All right. We're talking about principles.
Yes,
all right.
Principles and purpose.
Principles and purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And kind of how do we, with so many principles, I mean, like you could Google books on principles and find hundreds and probably thousands of becoming successful and being a good leader. And not all those are bad principles to live by, but how do we kind of decipher and choose to focus in on the biblical principles that Jesus was teaching? Like, how am I like, you know what, I'm going to love God and love my neighbor today.
Right.
But there's also honesty, integrity.
Yeah.
Those are still good principles to live by.
Right. Yes. Well, all right. First, I'll just kind of back up. Right. This is actually coming from Jesus and his temptation in the desert. So after he is baptized by John, and God kind of gives him this blessing. This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. Okay. And Jesus has these marching orders. He's going to be the sacrificial servant of God who redeems mankind, right? And in order to redeem mankind, he has to associate with all of our weaknesses. The devil comes along and tempts him with turning stones to bread, which is not a bad thing, or having the angels rescue him from falling off of a really high place, or all of the nations of the world coming to worship him, which is what he wants. The only thing he has to do is he has to worship the devil, right? And what's really important about that is that it is very hard to distinguish the voice of God from the voice of the devil. I mean, have you ever? I mean, you never even think you're listening to the devil, because that's the way the devil operates. It just sounds like a good idea. You know, if you're hungry, a really good idea is to eat, right? And so that's what the devil tempts Jesus to do, is just to eat. Just tell these stones to become bread. And so that voice can sound like God is saving me from starvation or protection. Throw yourself down, his angels will come and swoop you up and protect you. And that sounds like something really good. If I'm falling down and I get protected and the angels save me, that'd be really something good. Or I'm going to get all of the nations of the world to follow me. And I don't have to go to the cross, and I don't have to suffer and no pain and all that. That sounds really good. And so here's the thing. The thing is, we can't tell the difference between the voice of God and the voice of the devil, because the devil is always giving us what we want.
Well, and he's weaved his way into what we consider just like society.
Oh, right.
Into media, into
just life.
Yes. Like, you need this to feel more protected because look at all the bad around you. And he's just kind of in tune, making us fearful of every single step and just telling us things that'll reassure our safety. Exactly.
You're going to starve to death unless you eat. Here, the devil's always coming to us with, I've got a better deal. I mean, that's exactly the way Eve, that's the temptation of David with Bathsheba. I mean, it's always, I've got a better deal. It's not ever, I'm going to ruin your life. Okay. So the question then becomes, how can we distinguish God's voice from the devil's voice? You know, if his voice always sounds good to us, so the Bible says the devil Satan himself presents himself as an angel of light. So he always presents himself as an angel, as light, as good, as hope, as, this is the answer and this is the solution. So we get so confused because we can't distinguish the voice of God from the voice of the devil. See, that's what's so difficult. And so that's where these principles come in. All right. So Jesus knows this. He knows if he's going to be the savior of the world, he cannot use his divinity to help himself ever. Right? He can never cheat. He has to be associated with all of our weaknesses. The only way to be associated with all of our weaknesses is to be limited, to be bound to humanity, to suffering in the ways that humans suffer, in whatever ways happen to come against him. Right? So when people are talking about him, when people are plotting against him, when Judas is betraying him, when the Pharisees are just being relentless in their unwillingness to just see his goodness, they get mad at him because he heals people on the Sabbath. They don't rejoice because a blind guy can see, right? Or Lazarus was raised from the dead. They say, oh no. You see, he's got to be subject to all of the weaknesses, everything you've ever felt, or anybody who's listening to this, that you've ever felt. He was born from unwed parents, in poverty, in a barn with a bunch of dirty animals. He had to run away in fear and live in a different country. He never really had a sense of belonging. So he knows what all of that, he can, because he limited himself to our humanity. And he did miracles for other people, but never for himself. In fact, he did miracles for other people at the expense of himself. It actually cost him. See, it made him a target. But he lived by that principle that if I'm going to redeem mankind, human beings, then I have to be limited. I can never, it's like Peter wanted to rise up with a sword and fight the Romans when they came to take Jesus away. And Jesus says, no. He says, yeah, don't you know I can call down 12 legions of angels and they would rescue me? I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. I am limited. I'm living by a principle, and the principle leads him to his purpose. Right? The principle leads him to his purpose. And his purpose is to die for the sins of the whole world in order that we might live. He was limited in order that we might not be limited. See, so even when he was on the cross, one of the thieves on the cross said, hey, listen, why don't you save yourself and us? You're the Son of God. Save yourself. No, even there, even when he's dying, right? He doesn't cross that. Even in the extreme situation, he doesn't cross that line. He lives by purpose he lives by that principle because that principle leads to his purpose. And so I think your question was, how do we decide what our principles are?
Could you imagine living for such a great principle as that? I mean, that's like the top tier, like, example of living by a principle to die for all of our sins.
Yeah. And and no matter who we are, you're living by principles. You may recognize them. You may not recognize them. They may have just been given to you. You adopted them, and you're kind of, all right. But at some point, human beings have to decide. See, we get to make the choice. We get to decide, what principle do I want to live by? And that's the great thing about being a human being. I'm never stuck where I am. If I got myself where I am, I can get myself out. I just got to change the principles that I'm living by. If I'm a drug addict, let's say, or alcoholic or whatever, I've been living by a principle that got me there. All I've got to do is decide to live by a different principle. We have the five principles that we have here at Discovery. The treasures, right? Love God, find freedom, see God, be able to see God in your life, be looking for God, experience healing, and discover joy. Now we've got those five, and at any given time, if you're following one of those principles in your life, it will take you in the right direction. Having the right principle in your life leads you to purpose in exactly the same way that going in the right direction will lead you to the right destination. You can't go in the wrong direction and end up at the right destination. It's impossible. And by the same token, you can't live by the wrong principles and end up with the right purpose. You got to get the principles right. And that's what the whole Bible is about. It's about giving us these principles. And so the one I think you said before is that, they're really the greatest commandment. Jesus says, love God, love your neighbors as you love yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we would just do that, if we would love God, love our neighbor as we loved ourselves, just that one, which happens to be the first one we have, love God, right? But it encapsulates all of that. If you live by that principle, it changes every decision that you make. It changes all of the people you meet, everybody you talk to, how you're going to interface, whether you're going to cheat or not, whether you're going to stab somebody in the back or not, whether you're going to lie or not. It affects every single one of those decisions. And each one of those decisions is another step in the right direction that leads you to the right destination. Living by that purpose. Also, without living by a purpose that you've chosen for yourself, based on the principles that you've chosen for yourself, life is just not exciting. You don't know if you're getting where you're supposed to be going or not getting, or you're winning, or you don't know why you get up in the morning. You sort of get up and you can't wait to just live for the weekend when you start drinking again, and then it's Monday morning, you start all over. And that is not life. That's not hope. That's not joy. That's not good. That's not what God's designed for us is.
You say life's not exciting, but take it from a perspective of like a person in the secular world that might not even have any principles. Like they are living for success. Like they're living.
That's the principle then.
To like win, like
right.
take running for election, for example, because we've been talking about that this last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
like,
okay. Yeah.
I don't know that they live by any principles anymore, and
right.
People just affirm what they see in the media, whether or not they believe it's a good principle or a bad principle, and so they're just living to win.
Living to win, right? The ends justify the means, right? That's what they're living by. Because we think we're right and we're better, the ends justify the means. Any way I can get there will be right because me being there, me winning, is the best possible outcome. So it's just justified means. but they're living by a principle. Not all principles are good. Some principles are really bad, like just winning at all cost. Winning at all cost. I did the thing about John McCain and how John McCain was really a noble person. He was a decorated Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, so many different and really stand-up guy. He stayed in a military concentration camp in Vietnam for 5 years and some change, but he could have gotten out much, much earlier. He just refused to do it because he wouldn't leave his men there. That's a principle. That's an honorable principle, and such a stand-up guy. And when he ran against Barack Obama in 2008, I think, and by all means, he should have won. I mean, he is an American, a hero of heroes, really, just distinguished, honorable, has so much integrity, and but he lost, and he lost because he wouldn't trash Obama. Really. They were branding Obama as not an American and as a terrorist and all kind of different things. And he just refused to do it and didn't want anybody else to do it. And that probably cost him the election. But he was living by a principle that wasn't win at all cost. He was living by a principle that said, America's better than this.
And that was 16 years ago.
That's 16
years. So where have we gone in the last 16 years? We are not there now.
We are not there now. Now, I think it's very different now. And I think it is, and we are compromising. You can't have leaders that you don't respect and think and feel good about it as a country and be confident. That is a very difficult thing to do. And so anyway, we're living by different principles now in our political system.
What would you say those are? Win at all costs?
I think they definitely are win at all. I mean, the ends justify the means. And say anything, do anything. And the absurd amount of money that's spent just on the political system is just extraordinary. So, but I think there's a reason why you don't really know what people believe, or you really don't know if you can try. There's a reason why confidence in the government is so low. And that is not healthy for America. That is not healthy for Americans. I don't want my kids not believing in their country. I don't want my grandchildren not to have a country to believe in, right? And we have fantastic institutions that we don't seem to respect or value, and so we've just got a lot of work to do, I think, to restore the integrity of our leadership.
And where would you say the church kind of plays a part in that?
That's a great that's a great question. See, the church is not, and the church is not a voting block. Okay, the church is not supposed to be a voting block. The church is the conscience of the culture. That's what the church is supposed to be. God didn't say, okay, upon this rock, I'm going to build my political party. Jesus didn't come as a politician, right? He was equally offended by all the political parties of his day. The Pharisees were the Republican Party. They're the conservative party. The Sadducees were the liberal party or the Democratic Party. They had Romans who were occupiers. They had Sadducees or tax collectors, or they had all kind of other ancillary political entities that were all around them. But Jesus was equally critical of all of them, right? And equally loving of all of them, right? He was willing to love a Roman soldier, even saving his illegitimate son, which was kind of an amazing thing to do. He even said of the Roman soldier who was the occupier, who everybody in Jesus's day hated, that he had more faith than anybody else. And so the church should speak to our culture and to our political parties and say, yes, in the same way Jesus speaks to the churches in Revelation chapter 2, where he says, you're doing this right, but you're falling short in these areas. The church should never go and say this party is the right one and that party's the wrong one, and this party's doing everything right and that party's doing everything wrong. No. The Republican Party is in a terrible situation where people are going to reject Jesus because they believe that conservative Christians are hateful and hypocrites and don't have moral values, or they don't have ethical values, or they don't believe in the truth. That is a consequence. So if I'm going to vote, and I'm going to vote as a Republican, I'm going to do so, but I'm going to do so with some regrets. And those regrets are that other 175 million people in the country may be separated from the gospel because of this presentation. You see what I'm saying? You see how that works?
In the same way you have consequences if you vote the other way.
The other way, where people would see God as irrelevant, or as abortion as somehow heroic, right? This is on the Democratic side, or Jesus as a mockery. Like, with the Olympics and the Last Supper, and I mean that's horrible.
Queens.
That's horrible. So if you're going to vote Democrat, okay, do so. I'm a patriot, and I think you got to vote, right? And I love America, and all that's true. But you have to do so as a Christian with some regrets that this is part of what I'm a part of and what I'm voting for and what's going to happen. I got to see not only the good, but I have to see the bad. We have to have eyes. Jesus says, he who has eyes to see, let him see, and ears to hear, let him hear. That's what we're supposed to see. We're not supposed to, rubber stamp something because we think this one's better than that one. Yeah.
You can think one's better than the other, but...
Right, but you just can't let everything go. Right? You have to speak to it.
And media is just going to portray the good of both, the good of whatever you want to hear.
Right. Well, it depends on the media that you're listening to, and it depends on the side that you're listening to. One side is everything's, I mean, if you're listening to a Republican supporting station, let's say, or a Democratic supporting station, you're going to hear things twisted. Because they're going to present it twisted, because they have a team and they're pulling for that team and they want that team to win. So they're going to present the good of their team and the bad of the other team. So you have to listen to things through a filter that understands that the information that you're getting is biased information, and then factor it in accordingly.
And the only way you can do that is to understand that that's not an end-all, be-all, that Jesus has to be your top priority.
Right.
If that's your top priority, then you're never going to filter it through an
unbiased
unbiased
He's the top
filter.
priority, because nobody's living up. This political party over here, the Republicans over here, the Democrats over here, neither one of them are living up to God's standard. They're not living up to God's standard. Neither one of them, right? And so we are trying to live by God's standard. And so there are definite regrets that we would have to have being associated with this thing that we know is falling short of God's standard. And we need to know where it's falling short, so we can speak to that, not ignore that, but speak to it. As the church, we're the conscience of the culture. If we're not the conscience of the culture, then the culture is just free to believe and think and do whatever it wants. And in that scenario, the strongest win. The strongest decide what's good, the strongest decide what's bad, and the weak just have to take it. No, that's not the way it is. You know, that's not the way it is for Christians. And that's not, upon this rock I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. The church and the principles given to the church. And that's why we need to live by principles, because that leads us to the right purpose, which changes the world, which is what Jesus did, which is a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yeah. And we should aim to be like Jesus.
Yes, we should.
Though we'll fall short.
Yes,
we still should.
Yes, but we repent, right?
Yes.
We say, I'm sorry. And that is the key. And unless you know the principles you're living by, you don't know when you stray from them.
And you never feel conviction.
You don't know when you stray. So you don't know when you're out of bounds. So you never say you're sorry. You don't know, right? But if you know the principles, you know when you stray. You know, then you can. That's why I'm supposed to say I'm sorry. I'm supposed to get back. I need to move back in line. That's what the church does. That's what we're here doing. That's a big way that we separate ourselves. Like Jesus says that the goats are over here and the sheep are over here, and the goats are the ones that saw me hungry and didn't feed me, and saw me thirsty and didn't give me anything to drink, right? And naked and didn't clothe me, and a stranger or foreigner and didn't invite me in. And the church is over here inviting in the stranger, clothing the naked, right? Doing the things, living by a principle that culture just doesn't live by.
Love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
That's it. That's right.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week.
All right.